minute. Thank you. Okay, we'd like to call Park and Recreation meeting to order, please. We have minutes from our last meeting on March 18th. Like to get a motion to approve those minutes, please. The motion is second. Any questions? All in favor? Thank you very much. Mr. Clerk, do have one. If we noted that there was an error in the minutes that we approved last week, the proper way to adjust those would be tonight. Okay. Thank you, sir. I want to thank everyone for coming for this meeting. I want to thank Mr. Hardy. He's here to present to us his findings on the Lock 3 survey that they did and give us a little bit of insight, I do believe, on what they plan to do with those findings. So, Mr. Hardy, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I know many of you over the last few weeks and months, the chairman in particular, have wanted to see the results that you have before you. I apologize, I sent them only probably about 15-20 minutes ago, but Holly does have a copy for every council member. These are the results of our online survey that we conducted, Lock 3 conducted several months ago to allow the community at large to submit names of bands or groups or acts that they would like the city to consider for specifically Old School Soul Night, which is one of our many dates throughout the summer that we have national acts. So that's what you see before you. We had 103 responses. And we rank them from the most frequently suggested down to those that just had one suggestion all the way through. As I was talking with Chairman Neal, we are definitely going to be using this list to select the National Act and other subsequent acts for Old School Soul, but we're also going to use this list for other dates that we have throughout the Lock 3 summer calendar at both Lock 3 and the Civic, because as you know, the Civic Theater helps us a great deal in booking bands. So we will be using this information to book those bands accordingly. So again, I know that over the past few months and years, the committee has wanted to see more community input in how or what bands are selected. And so this was an effort along those lines. So I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. I apologize. I had to walk out.
No worries.
So I'll ask if any members of the committee have questions first. Any members of council? So I'm going to ask a question, and you probably answered it when I walked out.
That's all right.
I appreciate these findings. You know, as you and I were talking, my question is, how do we determine, you know, which ones would take priority? And just from what I found in talking to people, I know Officer Ford worked and attended a lot of concerts. He could probably chime in on this, or anybody who attended Lock 3, is people really enjoy the venue, but they wanted acts that were more in their, you know, in their
Understood.
closer to their prime.
Yes.
None of them may not be in their prime. So, and they're willing to pay a little bit more for the right act. There was some pushback to paying for acts that were, because they were looking at how Lot 3 is utilized overall. So my question would be, like, I've seen these top groups going down to Midnight Star. I know a couple of those have been here, but groups would love to probably hear Gap Band or Belle Biv DeVoe.
Yeah.
So how would we determine, which ones we're going to pick? Is there going to be another chance to kind of condense this and have people choose from those? Or?
Certainly. So first of all, we always welcome any suggestions that council members have. What we have chosen to do in moving forward with some of the dates, particularly Old School Soul, is those that receive the most amount of suggestions. Really, I would say 4 suggestions on up, particularly 5 suggestions on up. We've been trying to nail down, are they on tour? There's some other factors. Are they on tour? If so, what is their cost? And after we've determined that, do we have a date that fits their touring schedule? So some of these acts aren't touring. Some are touring but may be booked elsewhere in Northeast Ohio, so we're trying to convince them that this is a good venue, et cetera. So once we sort all that out, we're very confident that, I would say from the 5 suggestion number on up, we're going to be able to book Old School Soul, but then also find other opportunities between Lock 3 and the Civic as a venue to bring some of those other acts in, even if it's not on Old School Soul. So we really are trying to go with those that were the most frequently suggested. We have had conversations internally about upping ticket prices depending on the act. I think we agree with you that if it's the right act and they put on a good show and people want to come, people will pay still a subsidized ticket price, but not the $15 or $20 that we typically charge for national acts. So we are open to that depending on all those other factors coming together. So there's really not a set category. I know that we've been looking at, again, those 5 suggestions on up. I think Full Force, that was like a campaign of folks that want to see Full Force. So we got to take that into account, but definitely looking at those top tier groups and figuring out ways that we can bring them in. But I definitely want to assure you, the members of the committee and the public, that we have definitely heard the concerns about booking acts that are great names but aren't necessarily bringing it anymore, that we can't do that. And so we're trying to find that balance depending on availability and cost.
So when you say not bringing it, what does that mean?
So
I'm just kidding.
The last 2 years ago we had George Clinton. The band was fantastic. We had some complaints that Mr. Clinton himself did not get up out of the chair very much. Yeah, last year, the group was booked to play in a full hour. I think they did about 45 minutes because that's about all the band could take. So I think we have to be very careful that the name might still matter, but the group, can they actually perform? And so obviously, and I know Chairman Neal knows this through the years, we've always tried to also balance other venues in town like the Tangier and others that bring in different acts like this. So we want to find that sweet spot that's a great show at an affordable price that fits with the touring schedule. So that's Bring It.
We got it. So on Full Force, is that a real number or is that like an illusion?
So you see our note there that this might have been a campaign on behalf of those that really like Full Force to get that. So yeah, I would say that we just categorize that as a top tier suggested group, but clearly that's so out of whack that there was a group of people that really love Full Force out there that got their votes in.
I'd like to say most of the good music is sampled during the time that I was born and the time that I was in high school. That's when most of the good music was, when I was born and when I was in high school. Everything else is being sampled from that period. But Council President?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, typically how much do we spend on national acts? When you say affordable, what is affordable like?
For sure. So typically, we are around between $25,000 and $35,000 per act. However, one of those things that's important for folks to remember is we try and operate Lock 3 not necessarily as a huge moneymaker, but not as a loss either. So if we bring in those acts, we've found that is a sweet spot from the standpoint of ticket price. So we can charge a ticket price as well as concession and beverages to basically break even on most concerts, provided the weather cooperates. What we are exploring, because you see there the OJs and Earth, Wind, and Fire are not $35,000. So what we are finding is that as we up our game around some acts that are both have the name but then also are still very relevant, they cost more. So we are likely going to still subsidize the concert from the city's perspective to keep the ticket price low, but probably have to start looking at, if we want to bring in some of these groups, a slightly higher ticket price. It'll still be cheaper than what you can find in Cleveland and elsewhere, but a slightly higher ticket price. And just for the sake of parity, we had a lot of responses, not just on this survey, but in the downtown redevelopment plan, as you know, from the steering committee, of mainstream rock acts coming back to Lock 3. Same thing would apply if we did that. They have to kind of pay for themselves. We don't have to make money, but if we're going to bring in an America or, some act that's more mainstream folk or rock, they're going to cost more, but we also need to charge a higher ticket price to be able to cover our costs. So we're not looking to make money. We know that we're trying to keep it affordable, but given the responses from this survey and other surveys, we know we're going to need to explore that.
You're banned from speaking on this. Ms. Samples.
Thank you. So, have we tried to reach out to some of these artists to get pricing? Because you said between 25 and 30. I know Salt and Pepper doesn't cost that.
Correct. So
I'm
we
just
have, not that personal opinions matter. My favorite on this list is Belle Biv DeVoe.
Yes.
They are not $35,000.
No, they're not.
Neither is, some on this top tier list are 35 to 40. Mm-hmm. But I would say that they range from 35 to 40 all the way up to, depending on the date, $100,000 to book the band. So I think, again, we have reached out to many of them, and we are going to book somebody from this top tier list. So we will definitely be paying a little bit more this year, but again, that's what the community's asked us for. And to Councilman Neal's point, if they're putting on a good show and it's a group that people really like and they've expressed that, not an enormous amount, but maybe an extra $5 to cover costs or something like that we could get away with. So none of these are really within our typical price range. But what we also don't want to do is, we have done a good job with the Civic to pool our risk as much as possible. Right. But if you bring in Earth, Wind, and Fire and it rains, and you have to issue partial refunds or refunds, the city takes the risk of that concert coming off. So what we want to do is take the risk, but also not create a situation where other dates in the season are impacted because one concert got rained out.
Right. I just want us to be a little mindful this year that we don't end up with another George Clinton type situation. That was horrible, and I heard he cost quite a bit, and that was, Cameo was great, but it's like Tangiers keeps bringing the same people back over and over. I would hope we are not going to keep bringing the same people back over and over. And again, some of us like the 80s, I'm just saying.
Understood.
Ms. Sims?
So, Mr. Hardy, would it be or make sense, so for the new larger ticket items to avoid rainouts, is it possible to put a facility on retainer for that purpose so we don't lose like that? Like, say, night or somewhere in downtown that we could do that?
Yes, we have explored that. In fact, we've done that in the past with the Civic Theater. With the Civic's not in use that date, we will use it as a rainout. The other thing that we instituted, I think 2 seasons ago, was the pre-sale. So pre-sale tickets remove some of the risk, so we know if we book an act and it sells out, you know, or we sell our pre-sale within a matter of days, then we're probably going to be okay no matter if the weather's bad or not, or good. We've also learned that that will show us if we're lagging in ticket sales, that we missed the mark and that we need to do not just more promotion, but think about that in the future. So to your question, yes, if the data is available specifically in the Civic, we will use that or have used it in the past as a rainout. EJ is a little bit more difficult because we don't own it, but it's certainly an option for a rainout location.
Thank you.
Mr. Hardy, just a couple of things came to mind. Have we ever, one, to share the risk, looked at partnering with local businesses that are in this market, coming together and collaboratively going after this? I know the city has done this with Keepers of the Art.
Yep.
And they do a nice educational piece when they do it. There's others that do this type of promotion to share the risk in that way. I know you can always get the insurance policy. You have to average that into the cost. But the other thing is, if it's going to cost us by the time we advertise and do this type of stuff, the 25 to 35, have we thought of putting together a checklist and seeing if there's any promoters that would want to come in and like we just give them the venue and we take the a split on the concessions with them, because then we know that right off the bat we're providing entertainment, which is what we want to do. We're bringing the energy downtown that's going to help all the businesses, and we know right off the bat we're coming in with the 25 to 35 that we would have to spend in our pocket, and we just take a smaller cut on the concessions.
So to the first point, yes, we would be very open to partnering with local promoters, Keepers of the Art, where we're looking to do that again this year with them. But if you know of anybody else, send them my way and we can get hooked up there. And then we have reached out proactively to Live Nation. They're pretty much the only game in town these days, and we've brought them in to evaluate our venue. And the one thing that I've learned that I didn't know going into that engagement, we don't have anything formal with them yet, is that, you know, when they bring in an act or they have an interested act that they're looking to place that could fit in a Lock 3, they look at all the Lock 3 type venues in Northeast Ohio and figure out what's going to be the best fit for that artist. And so we want to be on their radar, but then we also need to make the case that we're a different market. We pull from different avenues. So somebody from Canton definitely comes up to Lock 3. But what we're seeing in the data is people from Canton don't typically go up to Cleveland, so we're a different market. And then secondly, what we've learned is if we're really going to be able to be successful in a partnership with a global promoter like a Live Nation or a Belkin, we probably need to take a look at Lock 3 as a venue and make some adjustments, especially on reserve seating is a big deal for them, so they want to be able to guarantee a certain number of reserve seats that can be sold at a higher price. But they are absolutely willing to share the risk in those environments, and it could be a very good benefit to the city of Akron and even a revenue generator if we can strike that. So if we can make our case that we're a good market in Northeast Ohio, and then, you know, not huge ticket items, but just retrofit Lock 3 so that it's possible to have a larger reserve seating than we have, I think we could be in a position to be a viable candidate for the Live Nations and the Belkins of the world.
I would like to, and you mentioned this because you know some of the folks that are, these art associations that are here that are working downtown, that we reach out to them and do a homegrown type thing. Because I know once the big boys get in, they kind of like restrict that these guys can't perform in different areas, and it makes it kind of tough. I think we can, just by connecting with other cities, like Columbus does a beautiful jazz thing right around the time we do our African festival, like the third week in July. I mean, it takes up their whole riverfront. Beautiful. You know, I don't know what Toledo does, you know, Dayton, but those are all close enough, just far enough to where people may not want to drive that far, but close enough to where if we partner, hey, you guys are going to have them this day, we can have them the next day, I think we can use our collective to make it more worth our while. But I appreciate the information that's shared. I look forward to seeing how we how we utilize it. I do know that there is an interest, and I'll get with you, for local folks that do this, that would love to partner
Sure.
with the city. And I think if we, because we have people that have this expertise, if we keep it in-house, so to speak,
Yeah.
you know, you're going to pay a little bit premium with that name brand, a Belkin or Live Nation. So,
Sounds good.
any other questions from any other members of council? If not, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. If there's nothing else to come before council, the motion to adjourn, please. Thank you. We're adjourned.